Hi there, good afternoon. This is Akiva with Question Everything. I'm here with Robyn Meyerson. How are you doing today?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. We're here in the majestic city of Tzvat, right? We got to know each other a little bit. You're not just a friend, but you're now family, right? My nephew married your daughter.
That's right. Beautiful ceremony.
Beautiful ceremony, and we love Tzvat, right?
It's gorgeous.
Gorgeous. And you know, before I even met you, I heard about your story, and I even told my sister-in-law, I said, you know what, I want to interview this woman because I did some research and I found out about your story, and I found it really compelling. So we're just going to do a little deep dive, if that's all right with you. And before we get to talking, I want to introduce you to my audience, that you are known as a change maker, an unsung hero, and an influencer,
That's right.
which I think is really cool. And then you have a lot of different platforms that you work on. And one of your primary platforms is working with Havrat Kadisha. We're going to talk about a few of your platforms, but this is one of your primary platforms. Before we get started about what it is you do, how did you get involved in this noble cause?
Well, I'll tell you a secret. I didn't actually grow up knowing very much about Judaism at all. I grew up in Australia, Malaysia, and England, and I never heard of kosher. I never heard of Shabbos. I never heard of anything. And I was blessed to meet a Jewish man and marry him, thank God.
Okay.
And we went to Israel, and from there, in our early 20s, we discovered Judaism and took classes. And from there, it just kept growing and growing and growing. And from that, I stepped into a role of supporting rabbis around the world in noble causes of the Hever Kadisha, Shabbos, and Cure of Jewish outreach.
Awesome. Now, for folks out there, you know, there's a lot of folks out there, and I'm sure everyone has those relatives and friends, right? That they passed on, and now they're like, well, we'll just cremate them, right? And God forbid, right? It sounds so horrible and crass, but why is it something that people need to pay attention, particularly Jews? Why do Jews have to pay attention to proper burial? Why is it important? Why can't we just blow our ashes out onto the French Riviera?
So the truth is that all humankind deserve to have a proper burial. Adam Rishon, the first man, was actually buried. So all people need to be buried. Even ants bury other ants. You know, animals bury other animals. So it's the gentle, loving way to go. And from the earth is where we came, and from the earth is where we need to go back to. When you use fire to get rid of something, you really are destroying it completely. And it's violent. And it's, you know, you just have to think about the Holocaust or think about the Spanish Inquisition. That's what our enemies do to get rid of us. But burial is loving, it's gentle, it's calm. I mean, it's not pretty, it's organic, but it's the gentle, loving thing to do. And
Right.
it's so important for a person because we're not just a body, we're a soul in a body, and our soul lives on for eternity. And it's not like you just live 70, 80 years and then you're done. No, you go on forever and ever for eternity. And you get a really good eternity when you get a burial.
How do you promote this message, though, to someone who is completely not observant, though, and they have no connection to Judaism, though? What's the sales pitch then? How do you promote it then?
So I always ask a very important question. I ask why. Why do you choose cremation? And most of the time it's just because of a marketing ad or a sales pitch that they've heard, and they just have the wrong information. They just don't know. They just don't have a proper Jewish education. So basically I say, well, why? And let's say someone says, I'm claustrophobic, because people will say I'm claustrophobic. They don't want to go in the ground. And I say, well, it's way worse to go in an oven. Or someone will say, I just don't have enough money to have a Jewish burial. And I say, don't ever think of money as the reason, because there's the Jewish Free Loan, there's the Jewish Free Burial Society in Staten Island. There are cemeteries across the country which will take care of people. They never have to make this decision based on money alone.
Have you received static from family members where let's say one family member wanted to give the proper burial and then the other didn't? Did you come across that?
Yeah, I've been helping families for the last I think 9 years with this, actually longer than that, the last 11 years helping people. And it's usually someone wants to do a proper Jewish burial, another family member doesn't. And so it's a matter of coming to terms, talking it through, just sharing the pros and cons, sharing all of the myths, because there's so many myths. People think, oh, it's better for the environment to do a cremation. That's totally wrong. During COVID, the crematoriums were actually turned off because there was too much pollution going into the air. People will think there's not enough land. I tell them that Walmart parking lots use more land than cemeteries. So actually we're here in a beautiful military cemetery. So, and I tell people there's a place to visit. If you, after you lose a loved one, you want to go back, because in Hebrew, the term Beis Chaim means home of the living. Why would a cemetery be called home of the living? It's because part of the neshama, we believe, is always there. Always. So part of the soul goes up to God, and part of the soul stays by the cemetery, and that's why we go visit. And that's why men actually put in their tzitzits. And so because they don't want to disrupt or make the neshamas, the souls that are there, uncomfortable, because they can't do it anymore.
Wow. Amazing. So we talked earlier just a little bit, and you said, well, beyond just talking about, the next world, you also want to focus on helping Jews thrive and survive and in this world. So tell me a little bit about how you do that. I know that you're a life coach. Is that right?
Right. I'm a life coach, and I have the honor. I started an organization called Project Inspire Arizona, and it's a group of volunteers that learn and grow together. So we have Jewish people of all ages and backgrounds, and they're learning different types of Jewish wisdom, either on the phone or in person or on Zoom. And I also take Jewish women to Israel on a trip called Momentum. It's a birthright for moms.
Okay.
So I like to focus on the living, and I also like to take care of the people who've passed away.
Right.
So because you can have a great life in this world if you know more about your Jewish heritage. So many people, 80% of the Jewish people in America are intermarried, and that's why it correlates to 80% of the Jewish people on the West Coast are cremating.
Yeah.
So we have to bring our Jewish people closer, and the way you do it is through love, taking them to Israel, learning a little bit of.
Wow. When was the first time you were here in this country?
I came when I was 27 with my husband, and then thank God I've had the privilege to be able to come back again and again with my children, and to give them a love of the land, and also to bring women on trips so they can learn and grow.
Cool. And so you're a life coach, and what do you see the theme of life coaching? What are people's issues today, or what are their biggest obstacles? I mean, we're living in tough times right now, in this sort of post-COVID era, where just everyone's trying to make sense of everything right now, and just everything that's happening to us geopolitically and in the world at large, and our own inner world, and everyone's trying to make sense. What are you finding with the women that you work with? What are some of the biggest obstacles that you're coming across?
So people are lost, and one of the greatest things to do is to return a lost object. It's actually a mitzvah to return a lost object. And so what I try to do is return their lost soul to them. And by doing that, they have the greatest joy and happiness when they come back to their true selves of learning about Shabbat and learning that it's not just a day of rest, but it's actually a day to create yourself, to create your best self, to have ultimate happiness, to refine your personalities, your skill sets, your middos, your character traits. And so I find people are unhappy and they're confused because they're not on the path. But once they get on the path, and they can experience the joy and the love of, because God loves us. He wants to give us the greatest joy and the greatest pleasure. And by observing our mitzvos, you have the greatest joy and pleasure. And people who I work with who are upset or confused or unhappy marriages or unhappy whatever, it's because they're just a little bit off, a little bit off the path.
Right, right. In my research last night, you were talking about how we need to beef up our spiritual bank account. Can you tell us what that means?
Sure. So a lot of people keep a spreadsheet of their assets, how much money they have, right? How many houses they have, how much jewelry they have, whatever, right? They keep a spreadsheet and they know their net worth. But my goal is to also help people have a spreadsheet of their spiritual net worth. How many mitzvahs did they do? How many smiles did they give to people? How many Jewish books did they read? That's how you build your spiritual net worth. And you can't take your cars or your houses with you in the next world, but you can take all your spiritual net worth with you to the next world.
It must be interesting for you because you're constantly kind of overlapping the world to come and this world. So you have ties with the world to come, right? And then the ties of this world. So it probably keeps your head on straight, I imagine.
I'll give you a little secret. So a lot of people think Shabbat is a day of rest, but it's actually a taste of the world to come. It's a taste of the next world. It's kind of like you're in this different time and space, a different reality, and that's the next world. Because God wanted to give it to us every 7 days, not have to wait 6,000 years.
Right, right. Awesome. Tell me about your, you've written a couple books, right? One of them is if I'm saying this correctly, the Midos Miracles. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Right. Tell us a little about this book, and maybe you can share an anecdote or a story if you wish.
Sure, sure. So I've written a few different books, and I like to interview people and do short stories. Like you do interviews in this realm, I do it in written format.
Okay.
So I like to write short stories, and I have an amazing co-writer with me, Rosalie. She lives in Israel. And we've written stories about people overcoming their personality flaws. Let's say they have an anger management issue, or whatever issue it is, patience issue. So we write short stories about how they've overcome their character flaw and how they continuously work on improving themselves. And I also wrote a book on the next world, true life miracles about the afterlife. So all short stories, true miracle stories about that. And I also have the privilege to work for the chief rabbi of South Africa. And I'm promoting his book, Shabbat, A Day to Create Yourself. And we have, thank God, we've set up over 300 learning groups
Oh, wow.
around the country, in the United States.
So we say that these afterlife miracles, are we talking about people who have dipped into the afterlife and they've come back and they've reported? Is that, I want the skinny on that.
I'll tell you, do I have time to tell you
Yeah,
one
of course.
story?
Yeah,
Okay, so I'm going
please.
to tell you one. They have so many amazing miracle stories, but I'll tell you one story, and that's how I got into this, helping people with proper burial. So about, let's see, almost 12 years ago, I was in the Hever Kadisha, which is the burial society, and I still am. And one of my family members, as I'm a Baal Tshuva, I've come back to knowing my Jewish ways. I have 18 first cousins, and I love them, and I try to stay in touch with them as much as possible. And I reached out to my aunt one day, who lives in Las Vegas, my Auntie Myra, and I just called her to say hello, because I just love her. She always gave me the cutest presents when I was a little girl. And she said, "Are you calling because you heard the news?" And I said, "What news?" And she said, "Uncle Arnold has passed away." I'm like, "Really?" I had no idea. I was just calling to say hello. And I said, "Okay, I'm so sorry. When's the funeral going to be?" And she said, "There isn't going to be one." And I said, "No, you can't bury my uncle." So I was pleading and begging and praying. And for 2 weeks, my uncle was in the crematorium. And it's a miracle. There's several miracles. The first miracle was that they didn't cut out his body part. They cut out artificial titanium, like the knees, artificial knees, pacemakers, these things, because they don't want to destroy the crematorium machines. So the first miracle was that he wasn't touched.
Wow.
The second miracle was it was taking 2 weeks. Thank goodness that it was taking 2 weeks, because it can happen within a week. So I kept calling my cousins, and they weren't moving. They weren't deciding what to do. So I gave some tzedakah to an organization called Hevra Lomdei Mishnah. They study Mishnayos for the person who's passed away. And when you rearrange the letters of Mishnayos, you get neshama. And it's customary to study Mishnayos for someone who's passed away, because it provides comfort to their soul. So I didn't tell my cousins I was doing this, because they don't know. They didn't know what Mishnayos was. So I gave tzedakah, and then I gave it on a Tuesday morning. That night, my uncle came to my cousin in a dream, and he said, "Get me out of here."
Whoa.
So my cousin, she woke up. She's like, "Okay." So I called her, and she was going to have lunch with her brother and sister in a restaurant. And in the restaurant was a fireplace. And she ran out of the restaurant screaming, freaking out, because there was a fireplace, and she remembered her dream from her father. So I called her at that moment, pretty much as she was coming off that experience. And I said, "Please, Valerie, will you please bury your father?" And I had, in the meantime, called the cemetery, called the rabbi, but I had no power, because I'm a niece. She was the one in charge. And I called her, and she said, yes, I'm going to bury my dad. So I flew in to Las Vegas for the funeral. And my Aunt Myra said, "This is your calling. God is going to repay you."
Wow.
Now, that's a very weird thing to say at a cemetery, but the miracles get better. I was 45 at the time, and I got pregnant, and I wasn't expecting to have a baby at 45. My husband was jumping for joy, and I was freaking out, thinking, so I went to a Rebbe for a bracha, and the Rebbe said, Sari Menu was 90, you'll be 45, no big deal. So I had my son, Azriel Mordechai, exactly on the yard site of my Uncle Arnold.
Wow.
Exactly. And there's a concept in Judaism called measure for measure. And thank God my uncle was able to merit having a Jewish burial, and I was given the gift of a child.
Wow. Well, I'm sure his neshama appreciates it.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if people really understand the implications of people's neshamas, that it is an eternity, and what the neshama and the loopholes they have to, not the loops, but the they have the holes that they have to jump through to get through, and the
Yeah.
different process of it, you know.
Yeah. I mean, we want to have a Jewish burial as quickly as possible because it's like going on a trip to Hawaii, right? You got your tickets, you want to go on that trip, you want to be at the beach in Hawaii.
Right.
Same thing, you want to get to the next world as quickly as possible,
Yeah.
so you don't suffer. And because you go through a little, you've been in your soul has been in your body for 70, 80, 120 years, and you want to move on. You want to move on to the next stage, and people feel scared. But they shouldn't be. It's like going from being a
Yeah.
baby to a toddler to a teenager to adult to
Yeah.
the next world.
Well, I think it's an uncomfortable conversation for people. Nobody really wants to talk about death. It's kind of a buzzkill of a conversation sometimes. I think that people want to shy away from these kind
Right.
of hard.
But we're all going to go.
That's right. That's
And it's
one thing.
not really death, it's afterlife.
Right.
See, it's not the end, it's just
Right.
really the beginning
Right.
of eternity.
Right. Well, when you live in a physicality, when you live in a world where that's all you have and you can't imagine that there's anything beyond, then it's scary because you want it to extend as long as possible.
Right, right.
Which is a right that we have to do. We have to work on our health, and we have to try to be as healthy as possible and extend our lives as possible. And that's what we do as
right.
Jews. We try to extend our lives as much as we can, but we're all going to go at a certain point, right? At 120.
Right.
So you talked about mindset. You were talking about that you're really, that you were talking about tranquility versus adversity. That's one of your platforms. Can you tell us a little about that, like what that is, and
Sure.
kind of how that tranquility versus adversity mindset?
Sure. So I've had the honor to work with Rabbi Niven. He's a life coach for the last 8 or so years, and he teaches about tranquility versus adversity, and that life is not meant to be like pina coladas on the beach all day long. No,
Oh.
it's really not, because you really don't grow, and it gets boring. You could sit on the beach for maybe a week, but then you get really bored, right? So life is about, even you don't want to ask God for adversity, but let's say you get some difficult times, and everybody does. But that's how you grow, and that's how you perfect yourself, and that's how you become a better person. So you don't want to say, I would like a difficult situation. But if you get one, you say, okay, I understand. This is to help me grow in XYZ way, depending what it is. So if things are too calm for a long period of time, watch out. You need to not be tranquil all the time. Always try to improve and grow.
Well, how do you pull yourself out of that when you're in that sort of fight or flight and you feel like the world is just coming down on you, and you have no room to breathe? I mean, it's easy to say that we're in the beautiful spot, we have this beautiful air, things are tranquil here, for lack of a better word. But when things are tough, how do you pull yourself out of that?
You make a list of gratitude. Make a list of the 50 greatest things that happened to you last year. We're in the new year right now, right? We're into our new year, new life. You can create yourself anew. So think about the last year and think about all the wonderful things that happened to you last year. And so when you're maybe down a little bit or thinking about how you want to grow or how the world is crazy, is it really crazy if, we're in a beautiful setting like this right now? The media can make it seem very crazy. But if you stop and think, you can do your purpose and do your will and do everything that you need to do to become a better person and change the world without the noise around you.
Wow, very good. How can people help your mission and people find out more information about what you do and your books and your platforms?
So I have a website called peacefulreturn.org, which is for the burial, and I'm always looking to educate people and raise funds for proper Jewish burial. I'm doing that 24/6. I'm on call to help people with that. And then if people want to learn about the Shabbat book, the Chief Rabbi's new book, the Worldwide Shabbos Project, they can go to theshabbosproject.org.
Okay, cool. And now that I know you're leaving this evening, I'm sure you're kind of bummed about it, but what were some takeaways from the mystical city of Tzvat, the city where Kabbalah was originated? Any takeaways? from
Wow.
this vacation?
It's
Or
it's it's been an amazing, it's been a fairy tale. My daughter got married to a wonderful man in a wonderful family in the holy city of Tzvat. Who could ask for a fairy tale? And then there were bulls walking across my front patio like 2 feet from me, and it's the only word I could use to describe this experience. Is a fairy tale and a
wow.
gift from God, really.
All right, good. Well, thank you for sharing your pearls of wisdom and of yourself. Appreciate it.
Thank
And have a
you.
safe trip.
Thank you so much.
This is Akiva and Robyn Meyerson. Don't forget to question everything.